Hello, this is my third video, the second substantive video, talking about what I think is going on in my case with NPD, unfortunately, um, and hopefully with some insights about what's really happening with personality disorders below the just the traits that we're so familiar with. What's really happening, what's really not happening, or what's deficient in a person that's causing these things. For a person not to be properly organized and properly you know integrated with reality. In the end. So in the second video, um, I was talking a little bit of how I feel like there's got to be some processing deficiency that for whatever reason, just certain temperamental characteristics that are preventing the full processing of information. I focused on impatience, intolerance, maybe a real strong response to things that are unpleasant. All combining to kind of limit processing. Now, in this video, maybe I want to talk about how that may be true. About the sensitivity and being avoidant. But maybe it's also true that maybe some people, maybe it has to do with the frontal lobe. They talk about the frontal lobe as giving us a lot of opportunity to reflect on things, to process things, even when we're emotional. And maybe NPD is, and other personality disorders kind of arise from just generally not having a lot of simultaneous processing of matters that are emotional for us. When we're feeling excited, nervous, when we're feeling really enthusiastic, or when something means a lot to us. We feel like maybe we're in a critical situation, critical to our standing, to our reputation. Where in critical moments we're probably just not processing as much as a normal person is. Okay. In other words, even though we might be really emotional, we might be really triggered, we might be really motivated, another person, even though they might be just as excited, they may just have a little more extra parallel processing going on to kind of watch what they're doing, so they're not just acting out, or they're not just reacting. So in my case, I can, if I want to, I can process more, but I have to think about it. You know what I mean? And so right there, I'm wasting more bandwidth. You know what I mean? So you can see how when you try to compensate, you're not really compensating, because you're actually using up more mental energy. Whereas the other person, it was just sort of automatic, and they have more free memory, so to speak, to deal with just other things. So the sad thing is that when a person has a processing deficiency, even when they try to correct it, they're actually using up more bandwidth, more memory in their brain, and so they'll never be normal, even by acting normal. Just the fact that you're trying to act more normal, you're actually taking up more energy, more mental energy. And unfortunately, people who are more healthy and who have better processing, they don't have to try to be how they are. They just are that way. So they have an advantage, and you'll never be able to fully simulate being normal. So it's just it is an unfortunate thing, and I think that it's been hard for me to accept always. But I've chosen that I will compensate to some extent, but I'll try to compensate in a way that I'm not trying to fool anybody to think that I'm fully normal, but I'm doing it so I can function. You know what I mean? So I fully understand it's a handicap adaptation, but I choose to do it not to fool anybody, not to fool myself, not to create a false impression, but to actually just get along in life and actually adapt. So um, in my case, I do think that processing deficiency is definitely at the core, I think, of probably most personality disorders, because I think what's typical of most personality disorders is you'll see a lot of people behaviorally kind of reacting and sort of acting out, either mentally or physically, um, in key situations where more normal people might have just more reflection and more wherewithal to sort of monitor what they're doing and sort of catch themselves being maybe a little bit foolish or maybe just outrageous, you know. So in my case, I think with NPD, I think, you know, the main acting out is kind of mental, not so much physical. And so the main acting out is sort of buying into sort of fantasy versions, distorted versions of what is really, you know, the actual situation of our lives, you know, like say our status, our how we assess our level of competence or our level of you know, how we rate ourselves compared to other people, or you know, we sort of engage in fantasy, and that's a mental acting out, you know, it's a behavior. And you know, probably deep down inside we don't have to choose to do that, but we sort of buy into that because it makes us feel better, and in key moments we just don't have enough extra processing to sort of control that mental behavior and sort of know better and act better, you know. So we fall into maybe more temptation, and then it starts to solidify into really a fake vision of who we are, you know, that really is just maybe at the bottom we know it's not real, but it's something we fall into. So anyway, so the last video was really talking about how I think NPD has a lot to do with basic processing deficiency, you know, mental processing deficiency and mental processing. But maybe we can start to ask, well, why would that come about? You know, is it just that we inherit, or we just by DNA we just have less RAM, like a computer, you know, like less memory, processing memory, or is it maybe that maybe as we were younger, maybe we entered into situations that kind of reduced our ability to process, you know, material, and we sort of adapted to a more limited processing of reality. You know, that's a really hard question to answer, because even if scientists could say, well, you know, let's say a narcissist has, you know, different activity in the frontal lobe or whatever. If they were to do similar studies similar to what they've done with, like, say, factor one psychopaths, you know, that have different operation of the frontal lobe or the amygdala and all that. Well, you could also argue that if you're sort of conditioned from a very early age to function less in the frontal lobe, maybe that lack of use of the frontal lobe will actually degrade the development of it, so that later in life you'll actually have less activity there. You know, sort of like if you don't use certain muscles, you sort of lose them. You know, so you know, it's kind of hard to say whether you're born that way or whether you're sort of conditioned that way. You know, maybe a combination of, I'd say, temperament and also adaptation. You know, so I'm very concerned about how maybe at early age, maybe in our family culture and our family environment, we're sort of adapted to have, especially in emotional situations, just kind of more reactive style. Maybe we're just not even given the modeling or the examples of being more reflective and you know, sort of having your feelings, but also having processing, you know, just to sort of monitor before just reacting. You know, it's a valid question that we should all ask. And but at some point, you know, once you become an adult and you already have the problem, the bottom line is that you're left with a deficiency in functioning, and it just has all kinds of problems. You know, so I guess what I want to talk about in this video is how as we start to grow up and we have this different processing capacity, you know, how really we sort of deep down inside know that we have something that's not right, or that's not up to par in our way, in the way we process information. And maybe we should fairly ask the question whether, you know, if you know that there's something about you that's kind of defective, deficient, you know, honestly, you know, if maybe that it in itself sort of transforms our personality a little bit, you know. And I do have the belief that when you feel like you're different, when you feel like you're not up to par, or you don't really belong in the crowd, I really do think that does something to you, and we have to be honest about that. I think it has, I don't know, it has, maybe we'll never know really, but I do know that, like say, just like when dogs feel sick, sometimes they just have an instinct to go run in traffic, we'll never really know why they do that. And maybe it's just fair enough to know that we'll never get to the bottom of it. But when for some reason you feel like you realize that you're not sort of up to par with your peers, you're not really, there's something about the way you process information that is maybe, deficient. Having that knowledge, that intuition that you're not really functioning like other people, I think that does a lot to a person, and I think when you combine with all the other problems of the, let's say a person who's developing a narcissistic personality disorder, that feeling like you're kind of less than, honestly, in some area, will just give you more motivation to invest in maybe doing everything you can to try to be like what you're not, to try to compensate. And you just end up spending a lot of energy trying to compensate for what you're not, and it's motivated by seeing other people and kind of just knowing in deep down that there's something wrong with you, you know. So I think there's just a lot of motivation, um, sort of a vicious circle of circumstances that just gives you every reason to invest in a fantasy alternative and to try to portray that, you know, and to try to believe in it, even though you're conning yourself. But it's just so much more unpleasant to deal with the other alternative, which is that you suck, you know. So, I mean, I think that when a person really comes to Jesus, so to speak, and you really just kind of realize that you're not going to get out of the trap, eventually, I think, for some people, it's possible to just say, okay, I'm not going to try to fake it, but I will try to do what I can to try to be as effective as I can, and to make, to navigate my life as best I can, to avoid having problems. And so if I have to artificially try to think more and kind of not be too emotional. I mean, it's so fake. I mean, because I know when I'm really triggered, I get very emotional, and so it's just kind of this fake thing where I'm just going to be, extra, kind of process the situation. It's really not me. I'm not really being authentic, but I know I'm doing it not to try to fool anybody or myself, but I'm just trying to, um, you know, trying not to have problems and trying to be as functional as I can. So it is, we're never going to get away from adapting, and compensating, but hopefully we can do it in a way where we're not fooling anybody, and we're not in the service of portraying something that's dishonest, so that, because that's the other thing, when we get into things where we start doing things that we know are dishonest, and when we're not being truthful, I think that adds another layer of transformation, because when you're being bad, so to speak, and it, I think that starts to really warp our personality and really transform us. In the worst cases, I think you get people that are really, really deranged, where they don't even realize, that they're getting badder and badder, so to speak. So in that sense, I kind of like the series Breaking Bad, because it's very cartoonish and it's way stylized, more than what happens with real people. But real people do go through those downfalls. We're starting from childhood. They just start kind of step by step, kind of stepping into badder and badder situations, and just being bad. Being either dishonest, being malicious, being taking liberties that you should never take, and how much that can warp us and change us. It's really probably impossible to estimate, and we shouldn't underestimate how much that can really derange us, and really make us very sick, really, really distorted. And we should never underestimate how much of an effect being distorted can have on our personality, and or even our ability to deal with our personality. So, and it probably can get to a point where maybe recovery is almost impossible. So we should have a very healthy respect for that. So anyway, yeah, just wanted to talk a little bit about that, and In the next video, maybe I'd like to talk a little more about this one issue that I really like from psychology, which is about locus of control. Not to say that you can pretend to have, like I know I don't have a good locus of control, and if anybody knows about, that's the one aspect of psychology that's kind of interesting. It's the cognitive behavioral therapy. If anybody knows what that means, I'm not saying that a narcissist can genuinely have a better locus of control, but I think it's important for us to see how in personality disorders, why the locus of control tends to be very external, and to maybe not try to fake a different locus of control, because if you don't have it, you don't have it. But sometimes you do have to kind of artificially make yourself have a different locus of control. You'll never be like normal people, but at least it'll help you, hopefully not to fool anybody, not to pretend to be better than you really are, but it might in the end help have a more functional life, and it should be regarded that way. Not like we should know that we have a handicap, but I do think this locus of control issue is very important in understanding personality disorders. I do believe that that's the one aspect of psychology that I think has been very useful in explaining different disorders, and I do personally believe that what really makes the personality disorder is not so much the cluster of characteristics and temperament, because you can have terrible temperament and characteristics, but if you're healthy and you have a good locus of control, you can sort of put that all together and actually have a healthy personality, even though your temperament is terrible. But when the locus of control isn't working, you end up being very reactive. And I think that is the hallmark of the personality disorder, not having unpleasant temperament. So in the next video, I'd like to talk about the locus of control. Anyway, so yeah, if anything comes out of this video, the main thing I want to talk about is how, through whatever circumstances, when you're younger and you start falling into those terrible temptations to be dishonest, to be, kind of misrepresent yourself, slowly you're starting to depart from a genuine integration with other people. And I think we should never underestimate the effect that has on your personality. Just the experience of being literally bad, really departed from others, really separated from others. We probably will never get to the bottom of how much that can distort us and change us, even permanently. So we should have a very healthy respect for that. And sometimes I think, the best you can hope for with a personality disorder is not that you're going to be cured or that you're going to not have it, but just at some point, just to come to Jesus, so to speak, and just have a real healthy respect for how distorted you become because of how you fall into temptations, over time as a young person and throughout adolescence and etc. And how maybe we just may have no idea how that's distorted and kind of broken us as people, So it may not fix us to know that, but the kind of that come to Jesus sort of like, wow, just I might not even be able to estimate how distorted I am as a person because of what's happened, as a young person. That might just kind of weigh heavy on us enough to just kind of motivate us to take a little bit edge off of the arrogance and just kind of reflect a little more and try to never try to pretend like we're normal, but just try to do what we can in an honest, authentic way to just adapt as best we can and try not to add more distortion to what's already there. So anyway, appreciate it. And in the next video, I want to talk a little bit about the locus of control, because I think that's a very important concept for understanding personality disorders. Yeah. Okay, thanks a lot. Talk to you later.